number 7.1. There was a recommendation there that was part of the AVICC resolution that didn't make it as a late resolution anyways, so it does not need to be on our agenda for this evening. Highlands will be dealing with that for next year. So looking for approval of the agenda with the amendment.
Your Worship, was there one item to add to the agenda as well?
I thought we had everything added electronically in there. Did it get updated?
That's right. Is it in here?
The flyby, is that what we're talking about? I read it in here. Marcy, did it get added? Did it get added into the update?
No.
Okay, so we'll add. Where do you want us to put it? Which? 6.3. So 6.3 Navy flyby.
I'll move the agenda as amended, Your Worship.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to the beginning then, public participation. If there's anyone in the audience that wants to address council, this is your time. You do have a presentation piece, though, if that's what you're waiting. Yours is coming up for the liquor store, correct? Okay. Anybody else? Nope. Then we shall move on. Mayor's message. Adoption, first of all, please, of regular meeting of May the 9th and special council meeting May the 11th.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Receipt, please, of 3 sets of minutes, Parks and Rec for April 18th, Planning and Land Use May 3rd, and Emergency Planning Committee March 15th.
Move receipt, Your Worship.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Mayor's message, nothing from mine per se at this point, but I know Councillor Martin has library information.
Thank you. Yeah, I got 3 quick things regarding the library. One, I just placed it on your desk. This was, we had our library meeting today. So this is the portfolios of what the Greater Victoria Public Library is attempting to do. And the only thing to really point out is under each category, if you see a specific number, that tells you how many librarians have been assigned specifically to that task. So it's their responsibility. Also, I just wanted to let everybody know, last weekend I went BC Library Trustees Association meeting was in Richmond, and I attended that just because I'm going to be chair in January. And the one thing I would point out is there is a website called thevantagepoint.ca, and it's a nonprofit organization out of Vancouver, and it has a lot of leadership information. So if you're looking for any sort of leadership information, it's all there and it's all free. So it was excellent. And then also just a quick update that the Wanda Fuqua Library is in the middle of its renovations right now. So it should be completed hopefully this week. We also had, they believe they had close to 500 people come out to the Langford open house at the library this weekend. So that, and also they're now saying that the Langford Y has already sold 3,500 memberships. So obviously there's a pent-up need there. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Any information? Seeing none, we shall move forward. Presentations for the Cascadia Liquor Store and 4 Mile Liquor Store. 5.1, Keith Barbin and Graham Hames. Now you can come to the podium. I'm going to try to get you to use the microphone just because it does pick up on our webcast. That would be great. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Graham Hames. I'm representing 4 Mile Liquor Stores. We have a liquor store at 310 Goldstream Avenue in Colwood, beside Thrifty Foods. We have one in View Royal at Admiral's Walk and a brew pub in View Royal. So here today to talk about minimum distance criteria between liquor stores and all types of liquor licenses. So I'll start by giving you a little bit of background. So currently in BC, there's a 1 kilometer distance criteria between private liquor stores and public or BC liquor stores. So if you go to relocate a store or just the license to relocate it, you would have to apply to the liquor distribution branch. Sorry, and make sure that you're 1 kilometer from the other store. So they measure and you can reject your application if you're not. Last April, the government made some changes to the wine on grocery store shelves program. So I'm sure many of you have heard about that. What it is they've allowed grocery stores to buy licenses and have wine on their shelves. So part of the process in that is they haven't enacted any criteria in terms of distance to apply to those licenses. So technically you could have one of these licenses right next to a private or a public store, where being a private or public store you couldn't otherwise. So we just wanted to bring that forward to look at it to be mandated for all the types of licenses, the liquor licenses. Currently, last summer, the County Royal enacted a 300-meter distance criteria between stores. I believe in March, Langford enacted an 800-meter distance criteria between all types of liquor stores, be it wine licenses or VQA licenses that the grocery store could buy and have, private and public liquor stores. And just to add to that, a grocery store could purchase one of these licenses and have it on shelves open. So you have a whole aisle of, for example, wine, sake, or cider available. So that's just a bit of background. Keith's going to talk about some of these things and answer questions.
Hi there. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Keith Barbone, representing Cascadia Liquor. So we have a store, been there for several years, Sun Valley and Sioux Grove, and also we have 2 other stores in neighboring municipalities. At a high level, we're small business people. We're just looking to understand the direction of the community and understand the effects our current businesses, but also on future opportunities related to retail. You're aware of provincial changes, and we're here, we're local, and we're on the ground. So we're looking for
Thank you. Any questions, council? Are you guys representing just your own interests, or are you representing the broader private liquor store owners group or association?
No, we're representing, but we're just, we're representing just our respective businesses in Alice Falls.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. So item number 6.1 is the letter from Cascadia and 4 Mile. Are you together there? That's within our agenda, and looking for receipt of information or reference to staff for future actions as determined by council. Discussion, council? Yep.
Thank you. Through you to staff, has planning department looked at this at all yet? And do they have any sort of recommendation?
Your Worship, I have discussed the proposal with the proponents tonight. However, staff have not analyzed the issue, nor have we developed any recommendations at this point.
Yeah, no problem.
Would it be appropriate for us to send this to you to do that?
They would need direction.
Yeah. But I'm just like, do you feel as though once you start doing some work, will you need council's opinion of this first, or do you feel as though you can do the work without understanding council's opinion?
I would feel it would be most appropriate if council didn't have all the information tonight to make a decision to refer it to staff for analysis, keeping in mind that we do have a list of priorities right now in terms of departmental workload.
Anyone else? I need something from the table. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Item 6.2, letter from West Shore Arts Council requesting a letter of support for their application to Canadian Heritage Grant, Canada 150 grant. Recommendation is that we receive the letter and direct that no action be taken, or direct staff to prepare a letter of support for West Shore to be signed by the usual parties. Council? I think we've done something similar for these folks in the past. Yep.
I'll do it. So I'll make a motion to direct staff to prepare a letter of support for the West Shore Art Council to be signed by Mayor Carol Hamilton to submit with the application for a Canadian Heritage Grant.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor Knoll?
Yes, the report and the letter make no mention of any financial obligations to the city. Are there any?
I'm not aware of any. The usual practice is simply a letter of support, their application forward. It's not. Any further questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 7.1 has been, 6.3, folks. Let me get back into 6.3 was a late item added to the agenda requiring council direction. It was a letter from Sub-Lieutenant Louise Goslin from the Maritime Forces Pacific Headquarters regarding the Royal Canadian Navy West Shore Navy Day public event to be held in Colwood June the 11th. And what they're asking for is support in a letter of approval be provided to CFB Esquimalt to authorize a low-level fly past as low as 500 feet in the city of Colwood on June the 11th as part of the Royal Canadian West Shore Navy's Day public event, and that the Royal Canadian Navy be requested not to go over the Esquimalt Lagoon Bird Sanctuary, as May is a sensitive time for migrating birds, and that the corporate communications manager be directed to include the information about this event on the city's website to increase public awareness.
Move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Item 7.1 has been pulled. 7.2, Planning and Land Use Committee memorandum regarding boarding school zoning text amendment, fee for municipal services with CPI annually. Staff taking this one, or is that going for introduction?
Thank you, Your Worship. Council will recall that the representatives of the Dwight School applied to the city to add boarding school to the list of permitted uses in the C2 zone as it relates to 1939 and 1945 Souk Road to facilitate the development of a new independent boarding school. Council has subsequently given first, second, and third readings to the associated bylaw. And prior to fourth reading, a covenant is to be registered that would see the owners of Dwight School provide the city with a contribution towards the partial cost of municipal services. Council has agreed to accept payment for certain municipal services that would see approximately $29,000 per year contributed to the city, and that rate would fluctuate based on mill rates and assessed value. The proponents of the Dwight School in Colwood have come back with an alternate proposal that would see the partial contribution for municipal services set at the same amount, $29,093.35, and then fluctuate based on the annual cost of living index for Victoria. That would mean that there would be some certainty around the amount that the Dwight School provides the city, as opposed to it being fluctuating on mill rates and assessed value. Staff has a recommendation to accept that proposal, and then also that there be an automatic clause in the development agreement that would see it reassessed in 10 years. Thank you.
Mover and a seconder, please.
I'll move it, Your Worship.
Discussion? Councillor Day?
Thank you. With removing the requirement to relate to the assessed value, are we not taking ourselves out of the loop of receiving value based on the increased value of the buildings? Through you to the planner.
Your Worship, if I could jump in on that. I think yes is the quick answer. A couple of reasons why this other alternative has been proposed is, number one, the applicant's looking for some certainty and means to project their costs into future years, particularly in what I would call the incubation years. And conversely, from our perspective, it's staff's opinion, particularly mine, that we need this to look more like a fee for service rather than a tax. And so using CPI as a means to increase the value is in more of an alignment with the fee. And then if there is a substantial growth in the development of the school over that 10-year period, that's why we would have that reassessment language of the contract in 10 years, so that we could have another look at what we've been charging and what's now in the school in that 10-year point in time.
Follow up?
Just follow up on that. What would the reassessment process look like in 10 years?
I would expect that it would be another negotiation with Dwight School, and not unlike what we did this first time around, where we came to an agreement on what the use was going to be and the assessed value and the mill rate at that in 2015 as a starting point. We would look at something similar, I would suspect, in 2027 or 2028, whenever it's 10 years from when the facility is constructed. So I would expect that we would probably look at something like that, but it would really be up to the parties in 10 years' time to agree on a process.
I guess my only concern is that the cost of providing services to our taxpayers fluctuates, not necessarily the same way that the CPI does. We have obligations in terms of salaries and wages, and without a very clear process and even a date, I'm concerned that we don't have a specific date for that renegotiation and no specific parameters around what that renegotiation will be. And I want to be assured that the citizens of Colwood are not taking more than what we should, but are recovering the cost to provide the services. So I would like to see a date of 2025 or maybe some other year if there a different year is and a process in place as to how that negotiation would take place. So as the recommendation is written, I feel concerned with providing support.
Any other discussion? Councillor Martin?
Thank you. I'm actually supportive of this. I understand why we're tied to CPI. I would prefer it not to be CPI because there will be a diminishing return down the road, as Councillor Day has mentioned, and I probably calculated out that it's going to be probably about 20% by the end of the 10 years. But saying that and hearing what Councillor Day is, I'm quite comfortable with adding a specific date, saying that the contract needs to be renegotiated on 10 years from the date of signing or something along those lines, so that it just becomes very clear, so that we know when the negotiation is supposed to occur. So would that cause any issues if we added that to the resolution?
I think, Councillor Martin, it's in there by the second part of the wording that
So
says,
then if it's taken care of,
include wording to require an automatic review by council 10 years following the commencement of the fee payment.
so there, it's taken care of. Great.
Anyone else? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to item 7.2.2, development variance permit application number 16004 for 3466 Vantage Point.
Thank you, Worship. The applicant here is requesting to vary section 5.6.06.2, subsection A, I of the land use bylaw number 151, reducing the side yard setback from 3.0 meters to 1.5 meters on the north side, and from 3 meters to 2.11 meters on the south side, and vary section 5.6.07.1, increasing the maximum lot coverage from 35 to 42.4% in order to permit the construction of a new single-family dwelling unit. We had the neighbors from both sides of the property. One spoke. Neither had any issues with this particular application and the variances that the applicant was seeking. Therefore, the committee recommended, and I so move the recommendation that's before us.
Seconder, please. Discussion? Councillor Nault and then Councillor Martin.
Yes, I attended the meeting and there was no serious neighborhood objections to the variances, so I will be supporting them.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Through you to staff, can you explain to me the difference between a single-family home and a small lot single-family home? Because I'm assuming a small lot single-family home has no ability to actually reach the 35% lot coverage. Like they'd have to over-exceed it. So, I mean, are we going to be over-exceeding 35% for every small lot?
In Colwood, our official community plan basically designates small lot as under 550 square meters in size. Excuse me. And in, I believe, the majority, if not all, of zones that allow for single-family homes on lots that small, we do bump up the lot coverage. I believe it's around 40% is off the top of my head where it goes to. I know that in some cases, 50% lot coverage is needed to do what the developers generally want to do on a small lot with the house.
Anybody else? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into finance and administration, report from building inspector on 2122 Souk Road, work without permit, request for notice. Finance folks are not. Yep.
He's our new finance guy. Congratulations.
Thank you, Worship. Jack of all trades here. So this is covering for the building inspector who's not here. This is to deal with construction that's been carried on at 2122 Souk Road without a building permit. And the illegal construction consists of a new sunroom built on an existing sun deck and porch. This has been ongoing for some time. January of 2013, a stop work order was issued on the residents at 2122 Souk Road. Work was being carried out to construct a sunroom on top of an existing deck and porch, and a letter which is attached was subsequently sent to the owner requesting that an application be made for a building permit. A building permit application was received. The construction plans were incomplete, but the site plan indicated the sunroom as constructed would not be in compliance with the land use bylaw. The owner subsequently applied for and received a variance. Given the closeness of the structure to the property line, revisions would be necessary so that the building would comply with the various fire safety recommendations and requirements of the BC Building Code. So this recommendation is because there's been some health issues with the owner and has been unable to submit the appropriate plans to secure the necessary building permit and carry out the completion. A number of email conversations have taken place in an effort to resolve the issue, but it remains unresolved. So this is a recommendation that a notice be put on title of the property that there are unresolved bylaw and building code issues. The notice limits the liability to the city in that if the property was to be purchased and occupied and there was an injury for example, a fire or trip and fall, the owner could not claim that they were unaware of the deficiencies. The new owner could not claim that. So the recommendation is that whereas work on the building located at 2122 Souk Road has been carried out or has not been carried out with permit or inspection as required under the City of Colwood Building Bylaw number 977, the corporate officer is directed to file a notice on the land title office stating that a resolution relating to Lot 5, Section 71, Plan 25-158 has been made under Section 70 or 57 of the Community Charter, and 2, further information about the resolution may be inspected at Colwood City Hall during regular office hours.
We need a mover and a seconder for discussion, please.
I'll move the recommendation.
Discussion? Councillor Knoll?
If the two recommendations are basically attach a notice or do not attach a notice, are there no other options? Could we require removal of the unauthorized construction, for example?
Through the chair, I believe that would be an option.
My feeling is if there is a health and safety issue, that is the course we should be taking. It doesn't matter if the issue is with the current owner or the future owner, just to say we've got a notice and therefore we don't have a legal responsibility, to me doesn't mean we don't have a moral responsibility for the safety.
Thank you, Your Worship. 2 questions. Did the development variance come to committee and council? Do you know? This really doesn't ring a bell to me, and so I'm a little surprised.
I'm not certain, through the chair, I'm not certain if it did come through to committee or council, or if it was it says it's a DVP, so I think it would have, but it may have been a board of variance.
It's almost 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Staff?
Your Worship, Just to respond to Councillor Nault's question, staff would still encourage council to proceed with the Section 57 because moving on to a structural removal order is another complex, I'm going to say quasi-judicial process that you have to give due process to the landowner before you remove it or order removal. In the meantime, the property could be sold, so it's just a good precautionary process to issue the Section 57, and if it's council's wish to proceed with a structural removal, that they advise staff to carry out that next step as a separate resolution.
Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just another question. I guess if we just register this and that's it, what's the deterrent, I guess is what I'm looking for others not to go and build an addition, a sunroom, and that sort of thing? If all we're going to do is register something on title, and I remember a number of years ago, actually, there's a two-story, 2 or 3 bay garage that was constructed that we said, no, you're going to take it down because there was no permits taken out, and actually it was pretty flagrant at that point. But I guess I'm looking for the deterrent from staff.
Your Worship, I think the Section 57 is just a first step in most cases. Sometimes it might be council's desire to simply issue the Section 57 where there's no health and safety issues involved, but if it's, life safety issues. But in most cases, the building code is related directly to life safety issues, and some action is expected to be taken post Section 57. Either they remedy the situation and request that the Section 57 be removed, or they remove the offending action, and again, the Section 57 gets removed. If neither of those occur, then it will become an enforcement issue at some point, and staff will be back in front of council discussing a removal order.
Thank you.
Councillor Day?
I think, given the history on this particular file, that the Section 57 is a good step towards protecting the city in terms of liability, and it allows for the most flexibility for the homeowner to take whatever time is necessary to either, find the contractor or be well enough to do what's necessary. It gives the most flexibility for the next step to perhaps not have to be as drastic as we had to be in the past when we did have that very flagrant disregard for the rules. I like to think that maybe it's just an error because it's fairly normal to think that if you had a sun deck, well, what difference does it make if you put the sunroom on top? So I can certainly see that it could be inadvertent, and I think that our staff would certainly report back to us in future if no other progress is being made. And it does protect any future owner who, might be caught in the crossfire, as it were, in a sale, were a sale to occur.
Anybody else? It does say in his correspondence there that he's hoping to get to it by August of this year, so we can be hopeful this at least puts notice, as you said, in there. So, with no other comments, questions, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Item 7.3.2, Engineering Administrative Supervisor, request for waiver of noise bylaw for Eats and Beats for July 9th. I need somebody to...
So moved.
discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. In a similar vein, we need 7.3, again, request for waiver of noise bylaw for Rock the Grove Barbecue, July 9th at Ocean Grove. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. 7.3.4, again, request for waiver of noise bylaw for neighborhood nights, July and August from West Shore Parks and Rec. Discussion? Anybody? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank God, we're going to be boogieing. Orders are
Seven,
going to be rumbling.
7.3.5, from our corporate communications manager, a information regarding enhanced development signs and process. Were you going to intro this,
Sure, if you like.
Sandra? Sure.
So planning and communication staff have collaborated on a new design for development signs. It also includes the new process which council already approved the amendment to the land use bylaw to facilitate that, so that developers will know they are using a new process for development signage. So I just wanted to give you information and give you a look at what the new signs are going to look at. You may recall that this was one of the 11 recommendations on a list of public participation enhancements that council improved, along with the citizen survey, which is now complete, and public notices on the website. There are several others that we need to complete, but this is another one we're knocking off the list to help improve public participation. So in the agenda, there is a picture of the current signs, where it basically just says this property is subject to a development proposal. And there's a picture of the new format for the sign, which gives a little bit more information, a small description about what's planned for the site, some applicant information, and a site map. There was lots of conversation between planning and myself about whether we could include renderings of what's planned for the site, which I think would be really nice for people, but it was decided that at this point there can be too much change between the time that a sign is posted and the finished product, and that can cause difficulties because signs are expensive to replace midstream. So at this point, this is the new design. Development applicants they have a new template, so planning staff will update the information and provide them with a PDF that they can take to the print shop, and then they pay for the cost of the sign, and they post it, and they submit photos to planning staff to prove that they've done their due diligence with that. So basically this is just information to let you know these signs are now, the process has begun, and these signs will be hitting the streets as new applications come forward from this point. Yeah. I don't know if the Director of Planning wants to add anything.
I'd just like to thank the communications manager for helping with this project. We couldn't have done it without you in terms of the graphic assistance. And I'd like to say that we'd love to put a picture of the proposed development on there. I really think that an image, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And I think it would probably be something that the city can consider when we improve the back end of our processes in terms of the information that we collect from the applicants and then how we share that with the public through the website. There could be an easier way to basically auto-populate the information that goes into the signage, and maybe in the future we could have actually a decal that could go on if the plans change midstream. But at this point, we're hoping to phase it in with this approach and then look to the future for improvements.
I was thinking even maybe, once this comes up, it has a number. If that number was attached to a website, click on kind of thing that you can go in and you can keep that picture evolving.
Actually, our CAO just offered the same suggestion that we could have a QR code, those small squares that someone could use their phone and go straight to the website for more current information. That's something we could implement immediately.
Brilliant.
Councillor Day?
Thanks. In thinking about the sign issue with, renderings of what a project could look like, I wondered if it would, I'm thinking back to some of the more contentious projects that we've had. Sometimes those renderings have really helped to either bring the community on side or create goodwill within the community where they see some of the greater benefits that can be displayed in a picture. And I'm wondering if there's anything that would preclude a developer from putting up this sign, which is all to standard and everything, and then putting up another sign that's specific reason for putting up that sign is to show a rendering of the potential project, and that would sort of alleviate that issue of, you know, here's the city's sign that says this is what we're doing, and I think a QR code is a great idea, and then here's the, you know, the artist rendering of the developers that they're trying to persuade the community to be in favor of.
Any other comments? Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think this is a good first step, and I understand the discussion about the renderings and stuff, but I guess when we're looking at rezonings, we're looking at land use changes. And so my fear is developers may not have a full package yet when they're looking at land use changes. They simply want to have that secured before they move on to the next step. And I just don't want to set a false expectation, I suppose, through the rezoning process to the next stage where they go full bore and have detailed renderings and that sort of jazz. And I think that's probably where the scan would come in. You know, as the project evolves, residents will be able to either go to the sign, type it in, or scan or whatever, but and see how it evolves. But I like the changes. It's very, very good.
Councillor Martin?
Thank you. The old sign, I know developers used to just leave a deposit, and then when they would get that deposit back. So what are we anticipating the additional cost that a developer is going to now entail that they did not entail before?
Well, essentially, there's been, through the chair, a transfer of costs from the taxpayer to the developer in this case of about, I think it's about $100 to have this sign prepared by one of the local sign shops.
Okay.
So it was a $20 fee plus the $30 deposit that the developer would pay per sign. Now it would be completely on the developer to have the sign produced for approximately $100.
And how many signs, sorry, as a follow-up, how many signs is a developer going to be required normally to post?
The land use procedures bylaw requires one sign per frontage of the property, so that you know, if there's a corner lot and it's got two frontages, it would be two signs. A conventional lot with one frontage would be one.
And a final follow-up question: when the developers used to leave a deposit, it was part of the idea that we would be able to get those signs down then too, because they would come back in, return the signs, and get a deposit. How, with the new signs, how are we ensuring that these signs are eventually being taken down?
Through the chair, I've actually gone on a seek and destroy mission a couple times myself, looking for old signs. Not that that's that good a use of staff time, so we simply ask the developer to take it down when the process is complete. And if we notice a sign that we feel is maybe providing misinformation to the public in terms of being up too long, we'll take action if it's not brought down.
Sorry, just as my final follow-up, this is my one concern. I'll use, for example, Seashell. Not Seashell. What is it? Seafield, thank you. Now that it has not gone through fourth reading, there has been a public notice sign up there for at least 2 years. And one of my concerns is if a project stalls, it just ends up sitting there forever. And I would love for us as a city to have a mechanism in place to actually have those taken down or removed, or perhaps even leave a deposit still, so that we can just make a quick phone call to the developer and say, if you want your deposit back, take the signs down, otherwise we're keeping it. That would be my only feedback.
Staff?
It's interesting you brought up that example, because the application at the request of the property owners has been kept active, and we're actually dealing with proponents to bring that forward for the next step, which is probably going to be coming back to second reading, so that we can bring forward some changes that the developer wants to make. So I think that's probably an extreme example of an application that currently the bylaw says that sign's supposed to be up right now. We would ask the developer, if they're going to come back and re-engage council, that the new signage replace what's there now so it meets the current requirements of the bylaw.
Councillor Day?
My last question, it really relates to trying to keep our signage fresh, because that's sort of been our discussion, and we've certainly had quite a few stale signs in Colwood over the last 10 years or so, signs that have been up for a long time, and maybe the project has stalled for one reason or another, or maybe even has come forward quite differently. And I'm just wondering if we're going to do some refreshing of our signs every couple of years at least, then visually the residents going down the road and looking at an old style sign would see that as different than a new style sign. It would provide some visual cue to our community as to whether that's something new or something that's been talked about for a while.
So we have a recommendation before us. I need somebody to move it and shake it.
I'll move it if somebody shakes it.
Seconder, please. Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Second report again from our corporate communications manager in regards to planning for a beach food Fridays on the Colwood waterfront, Cobourg Peninsula.
Thank you. So as you know, our waterfront attracts hundreds of people daily, and it's been suggested a number of times that we provide some services down there, food in particular. It's been proposed that we do a pilot project, which would be a special event running through the summer. We're calling it Beach Food Fridays at this point. That would help us determine the benefits and impacts of doing that kind of a thing. So it would help us with the land use bylaw update concerning mobile food vending. So just a bit of background. Following Eats and Beats last year, there was lots of feedback about positive response to that event, and that also generated a lot of comments about doing this kind of food service at the beach. In terms of background, back in February 2012, Council did direct staff to undertake public consultation and prepare an amendment to the land use bylaw to permit mobile food service operations. But due to overwhelming priorities in City Hall, this consultation and amendment have not taken place. Beach Food Fridays would provide the opportunity to undertake this kind of consultation and pilot test this so that that land use bylaw and official community plan update could happen. Paramount to any plans for this waterfront area would be protection of the pristine area, and strict regulations would be enforced about how this was regulated. So it's being proposed that for the summer of 2016, 2 licensed food vendors be selected and offered the opportunity to obtain a right-of-way permit to set up their food cart or food truck on Friday afternoons between noon and 6 p.m. during June, July, and August. The cost of the permit is proposed to be $150, and we do have a draft right-of-way permit. Strict criteria and regulations would be enforced to ensure that all vendors were licensed, have all island health approvals, and that they had all the necessary equipment and materials, and that they would remove all their equipment, all their waste, all their materials at the end of each day. The designated area for this proposed event would be just down from the washrooms in a section where the parking area widens. And the idea would be to have a nice roped off area strictly designated for food vendors so that it was very clear that only permitted vendors could use the area. And there would be an evaluation process ongoing throughout the process. And a report would be made back to council at their meeting of June 27th. Unfortunately, in the report it says June 20th, which is not a council meeting date. In terms of financial considerations, there wouldn't be many financial considerations. A small amount would be used to discreetly designate the area and sign the area so that it was reserved on Fridays for food vendors. But that would be offset by the cost of the permits, which we would collect. And this would be a great opportunity for the city to raise awareness about our incredible waterfront and, you know, both the enjoyment and the protection of it, and to leverage the promotional power of those food service partners. It would also demonstrate that Colwood's a strong community for restaurateurs to relocate their businesses to. The recommendation is that council directs staff to continue with the selection of 2 professional licensed food vendors to offer Beach Food Fridays at the Colwood waterfront during June, July, and August, using the proposed permit and regulatory process, and to provide an interim update on the project to council on June 27th.
So moved.
Thank you.
Discussion, Councillor Day, Councillor Logan.
Thanks. I think it is probably time to bring vendors to the lagoon, because people are purchasing food and coming down there and leaving their garbage, which we're cleaning up anyways. So I think it's a high time that we looked at trying to support some entrepreneurs in the area. The one concern that I have is the location being very close to the accessible art space. And I think I'm certainly envisioning that, you know, it'll be roped off and appropriately managed in such a way as to ensure that people with accessibility issues can still get to the art space and enjoy the waterfront there. I would like to, at some point in time, if this is successful, I'd like to see some of the possible revenue from this directed towards increasing the accessible art space. It was designed and built to be able to add more accessible picnic tables to that area. And so I see it as kind of maybe could be a really complementary use where it could help with increasing the amenities that are there, and the amenities could be helpful to the event as well.
Thank you. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Worship. Fantastic. My only question is, if the feedback from folks down there was such that they wanted to see it operate until 7 on a beautiful Friday night, do we have the flexibility to say yes?
I certainly think that we do. Those times were proposed after a few working group meetings between staff where we talked about, you know, strategized around this, and I think that we could certainly be flexible about the offerings. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
That answered my question. Councillor Knoll.
As you can see from the report, we've been talking about this for an awfully long time. All of the concerns raised about food vendors on the lagoon, I think, are very valid, but until we test it, we don't really know whether those concerns will materialize or not. I will support this, given that it's specific, that it's 3 months, this year only, and then will be reviewed.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. It's already been spoken of, but I would actually just like to have a quick discussion regarding having it later than 6 p.m. I know for myself, I would definitely utilize it, but there's no way I can get down there before 6 to have it, and I would love for it to be available to 7:30 so that you can wander down once you get home from work and know that that's what you're going to do for dinner. If you know that if everything's wrapping, if it's closed at 6, chances are the vending guys are going to start wrapping up at 5:30. So if you're not down there by 5:30, you're not going to get a dinner. So I would prefer to make a suggestion, unless staff think that it's unfeasible, that we actually change the hours to 7 or 7:30.
I'll just say that I think part of the reason those hours were determined was to ease into this. We thought there might be some resistance to the idea, and so shorter hours seemed like a good idea. I can tell you that food vendors all said, why only those times? Why can't we have more? So I don't think there would be any restrictions to expanding the time. I think it's a great idea.
Could I make a friendly amendment then?
Well, the recommendation doesn't speak to hours. It simply says June, July, and August, with a report coming back on the 27th. The report speaks to the hours and what might be done, but I think we can direct staff for that flexibility if that's what
Okay, so they'll meet.
council's looking for. Councillor Day?
Cool.
Just one other tweak to our process, and that's if we could possibly bring this back to a committee, because that allows for a more fulsome discussion about how things are going, and we might be able to get some suggestions from the public rather than just bringing it back to council. So that would just be my suggestion.
With a landing at Parks in that committee, does that sound fair and feasible? I don't have at my fingertips what the Parks schedule is for later June, but we might look at that, you know, and it's simply an update, right? So we can.
Can I comment on that? Not that I disagree with Councillor Day, but the only problem is that June, July, and August, a lot of committees won't even sit, just because it is the summer months. And so at least if it's reporting back to council, then we'll at least get an update in July and or late August. That's only that would be my only thing, is if it stays at a committee, then we might not even see it until September, October. That's my only concern. But I'm not saying it shouldn't go to a committee. It's just with the summer months.
I think we can just expect that it'll, you know, go through a process through council and committee folks in the next while as we keep an eye on this pilot project. We have a mover and seconder. Any other discussion? Call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. There are no bylaws before us and no in camera. So, Councillor Logan. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, folks.